Why the legal voting age should remain the same. A common argument in modern-day politics is over whether or not legal voting age should be lowered to 16. Supporters of this possible new policy argue that this would increase voter turnout and give insight to the realities of our educational system. While these might be true, lowering the voting age would allow young voters who are not fully educated in the government and politics, who don't have quite as much amount of responsibilities as adults, and who are not politically mature enough to play a major role in election outcomes. Ask yourself this: would you want the future of American politics to be in the hands of these type of voters? Most of the high schools around the United States offer a civics or government politics class, but very few of those schools make it a requirement to graduate. Because not all the American students are getting a formal, unbiased background on the history, foundation, and function of the U.S. government, they rely on other sources like social media. According to a recent survey, 54% of teenagers who get their news from social media platforms like Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Studies have found that people who find their news from social media will often mistake satire for factual news. This is a major flaw among the younger generations of America. Teenagers are becoming more reliant on the internet, social media, and pure hearsay for news. Another source for political information among teenagers are their parents. Kids are being exposed to their parents' political ideologies from a very young age. Kids and teenagers are very easy to manipulate because they soak up the environment surrounding them, which can cause them to share opinions with their relatives. Taking a look at this graph, it is clear to see that teenagers are more likely to adopt the same political views as their parents. As you can see here, this is the percentage of voters who are 16 and 17 and the same as their parents. Though not recently a bad thing, one downfall to this is that many households can be extremely biased. It can be incredibly tricky to decipher the false information from the facts when news is coming from unreliable, biased, and not credible sources like social media or family. Voters in America should be well informed, and they have the ability to form strong, educated, and unbiased political opinions, all of which 16 and 17-year-olds lack. Another argument supporters are lowering the voting age have is that 16-year-olds are legally allowed to drive, and thus should be able to participate in politics. Although this is a great responsibility held by teenagers, it does not quite match the amount of responsibilities held by adults. In 1971, the 26th Amendment passed, which lowered the voting age from 21 to 18. During this time, 18-year-olds were being forced to fight in the Vietnam War. Many people were concerned about the fact that the young men could fight in a war but couldn't vote for or against the leaders who put them in there in the first place. This circumstance is drastically different from lowering the voting age due to driving laws. With this logic, the voting age should be lowered to 14 because, in most states, this is the age which an individual can obtain a learner's permit or hardship driver's license. Driving is hardly even discussed in politics in the first place. Many areas of concern with modern-day politics surround healthcare availability, social security, unemployment, and gun control. These topics have very little to nothing to do with 16 and 17-year-olds and do not concern them in the least. This is another reason why teenagers' input in politics is hardly helpful. Finally, teenagers are not nearly as mature as adults. A study at Temple University examined the mental maturity and judgment-making skills among 890 individuals ranging 10 to 30 years old. Their findings show that mental maturity isn't prevalent in young ages than 22. These results had nothing to do with intelligence, but were effects of improved judgment and discussion-making skills. These flaws in teenagers are not their fault. They are the result of biological differences between adults and teens. The frontal cortex of the brain is the last section to develop, and it is home to good decision-makings and good judgment. this part of the brain continuously developing until 25 in most individuals. This means that teenagers' frontal cortices of the brain are significantly less developed than adults, and is the reason behind their lack of judgment. Decision-making and good judgment are some of the most imperative characteristics of a voter. It is important to have representation of all kinds of American politics, but lowering the voting age to 16 is not the most effective plan. By lowering the voting age, we would be allowing teenagers who are not well informed about politics, who don't have as many responsibilities as the current voter, and who are biologically incapable of being as mature as adults, to play a huge role in the government. It is out of the best interest of the American people that our voting age remains the same.